When you've been a professional photography instructor for 12 years, you've heard a lot of questions, but the thing is, all questions repeat themselves. That's why in this video, I decided to break down my last 12 years of being a professional photographer into one video. The advice that I give everyone to boost their confidence and increase the quality of their photos. Let's dive right in. Number one, in landscape photography, you should never look at the scene as subjects. Trees, mountains, rivers, lakes, what are they instead? Well, you should instead think of your landscape as shapes. Mountains and trees become triangles, lakes become circles, rivers become lines, and you use these shapes to lead your viewer through your photo intentionally. Where do you want them to look first? Then where do you want to use that shape to lead them to the next point? When you think about your landscape in terms of shapes instead of actual subjects, the composition really breaks down and you're able to see it in more simpler terms. Think about when you were first learning your shapes as a child. How easy were those things? Triangles, squares, rectangles, circles, ovals, they were simple to grasp. Just translate that simplicity into your landscape photography and you'll see an improvement in your composition. Next up is forcing foregrounds. Foregrounds are so easy to force into a photo. A foreground has to be strong in your image. It has to lead you somewhere. It has to introduce you to the actual scene and the photo. But when you force a weak foreground into the photo, what happens is that you're basically making a bad first introduction to somebody. It's said often by most influential people that you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Make your first impression strong with a strong foreground, or just leave it out of the photo completely and reframe your composition if it's not good. A major mistake that a lot of people make is viewing everything one way. That can be a lot of shots horizontally, or that could be a lot of shots vertically. When you only shoot a photo in one aspect of horizontal or vertical, what happens is you get stuck into the same composition over and over. Believe it or not, photography and composition actually repeats itself based on how you frame your camera. So if everything is horizontal, you'll see the same framing come up over and over, and you're leaving photos on the table by not shooting vertically. Vice versa, with vertical shots, you're leaving a lot of horizontal shots, those really zoomed in telephoto shots, on the table too. So don't get stuck using just one perspective. Really work on shooting both horizontally and vertically. Now, speaking of perspectives, the next is lazy perspectives. I once had a chat with a student who said, I think I'm gonna get a new lens and a new camera because my photos just aren't looking the way I want them to look. I had a look at their portfolio, and while they were doing a lot of great things with their photography, their perspectives were honestly lazy. I told them, you don't need a new wide angle lens. All you need to do is get harder perspectives. Work harder to get the shots that you want. If all you're doing is getting shots that anybody could get, then yeah, your photos aren't gonna live up to the potential that you want them to. But if you're laying on the ground to get low perspectives, if you're not climbing up high to get high perspectives, if you're not putting in the effort, you're not gonna see the photos that you wanna see. So don't get trapped into thinking that you need new gear and that new gear is going to lead you to better photos. Really do a self-check and say, am I working hard enough to get the perspectives that I wanna get with the gear that I have? More often than not, if you're not seeing improvement or unique photos, that's gonna be your answer. Now, in just a second, I'm gonna get to the rest of these tips, but first I wanna tell you, if this is increasing your confidence with composition, become a member of Landscape Photography University, because on there we have over 13 courses that are gonna break down composition and hours of instruction that's gonna give you even more confidence to nail the photos that you want to get. Right now, you can sign up for a free 7-day trial by clicking the link in the video description and in the pinned comment. Next up, time of day actually matters more than you think it does. You've heard photographers say all the time, go out and photograph in sunrise and sunset for the best light. But what about other compositional and photo goals that you have? Maybe for seascape photography, you want a certain level of tide in your photos to make your composition and your photo come together. In that sense, you need to understand what time of day the tides are rolling in high or rolling out low. You have to think about the time of day here and what kind of photo is going to occur within that period of time. Don't get stuck just photographing sunrise or sunset. Really think about the potential of every time of day That way, you're getting more unique shots, you're chasing light, you're chasing weather, but you're also understanding what's going on during the day when it matters. Now, we talked about being stuck with horizontal and vertical, but what about being stuck with one lens? So often the progression of landscape photography is you want to shoot everything wide angle when you're first getting into it. And there's great reason for that. Wide angle photos are dramatic, they're bold, they're in your face, you can fit a lot into them, they're beautiful images. But then people kind of progress into more of a telephoto look, maybe even a 35 or a 50mm lens. Really think about the lenses that you're using. Don't get tied into just one lens, because like the horizontal and vertical compositions we talked about a second ago, using the same lens over and over can repeat a composition too. All wide angle shots kind of look the same if you look at them. So when you vary up how you're shooting, you get more creative, you get more different kinds of scenes, and you elevate the quality of your photo, and you become a more well-rounded photographer instead of a stagnant photographer only shooting the same thing over and over. Now, we did talk about perspectives, but I want to fill you in on a little secret. Photography is a creative outlet. We need to be creative when we're out photographing. Don't just go around photographing looking as a human would, at eye level. This is people walking around looking at things like they would in everyday life, and that scene kind of gets boring. Don't forget to look down at your feet and look up at the sky. If you're in a forest, look up in trees and see what the foliage is doing up in trees. Maybe there are some unique designs or interesting light going on up in the trees. Maybe you'll find other objects that you want to photograph with a telephoto lens instead of a wide angle lens. If you're in something like the desert, look down at the ground and look for mud cracks on the floor of the desert. These cracks can be amazing to play around with. So really look down at your feet, up at the sky, look for interesting designs and patterns in nature, because nature is full of them. A huge mistake that I see so many clients making is only going somewhere once. When you're only going somewhere once, typically what you're doing is you're getting to a location, you're saying, wow, this is amazing. You get out of your car, you take a photo, and you leave. But more often than not, if you took the exact same photo with your phone, it would look pretty much identical. You need to go back to a place over and over. Here's what I recommend doing. First, you get out. Next, you scout. Getting out and scouting allows you to view what would look good in a photo in what time of day. Remember, we talked about what time of day earlier. Now we're starting to tie all this together, and all of this is going to come into the best photo of your life. So you're scouting what's going to look good in the easterly direction, what's going to look good western when the sun sets, what's going to look good for night photography, what would happen if this scenario occurred. When you start thinking of all these scenarios, you start thinking of ideas of what kind of photos you could get. And when that situation occurs, you're ready to go and get that photo. Next up, hiding your subject. You don't want to hide your subject. You want your viewer to easily find your subject and be directly attracted to it. So watch your horizon lines behind your trees that you're photographing in a field, or the mountains. You want to seclude out your subject and be really confident that it can be easily found in your scene instead of being hidden in shadows or behind other things or in front of other objects too. Really look for negative spaces and solid colors that you can place around your subject so that it's easily found. If that helped you, this video is going to help you a lot too.